In 1879, the prairie burned beneath a merciless sun, dry winds lashing through tall grass as if trying to snap everything still standing. In that unforgiving land, Clara, June, and May were left behind, no horses, no food, no water. Only dust, dried blood on their collars, and the cold truth that the men who once called them wives had slipped away in the night. May was the first to wake and hear the whispers. Leave them. They're no longer useful. No anger, no hesitation, just a hard, practical cruelty. When Clara realized what was happening, she didn't cry. She had always known men like that didn't know how to love, they only knew how to own. June was the only one who still held on to hope until she saw Luke ride off without looking back even once. 3 days earlier, they had believed their suffering meant something. Now, every illusion was dead. On the cracked earth, Clara tightened her grip on a gun with no bullets left, her eyes fixed on the dust-blurred horizon. They were no longer abandoned wives. They were survivors, and in that sea of withered grass, something began to change, not just the instinct to endure, but a quiet ember, waiting to ignite. Night fell fast and cold, as if the prairie itself wanted to test them one more time. The 3 women huddled beneath a jagged rock overhang, a small, flickering fire struggling between the stones. No one spoke much. Words couldn't fill their stomachs or make them safer now. Clara sat closest to the fire, scraping what little rabbit meat she had managed to trap. The meat was tough and bitter, but it was enough to keep them going for one more day. June stared into the flames, as if searching for a sign from the god she once trusted. May leaned against the rock wall, her hand clenched around the stone she had picked up the night they were abandoned, a reminder that she still existed. A wolf's howl echoed in the distance. Clara tightened her grip on the empty gun in her lap. She hated this feeling of helplessness. But when she looked at the 2 women beside her, she understood something clearly. They couldn't keep wandering aimlessly, waiting for luck to save them. "We can't keep running forever," June said softly. Clara looked into the darkness beyond the firelight. "We're not running," she replied, calm but unyielding. "We find a way to fight." May lifted her head. "With what?" Clara didn't answer right away. But inside her, something had shifted. Survival was no longer enough. They had been discarded like broken property, and Clara swore they would not merely endure. They would make those who abandoned them pay. Dawn laid a thin veil of mist across the prairie, making everything look peaceful in a way that felt almost dishonest. Clara was on watch when she spotted a lone figure approaching on horseback. He wasn't rushing or sneaking, just riding forward quietly, as if he belonged to this land. She woke May. June sat up at once. Fear sharpened their reactions faster than instinct ever could. The man stopped a few steps away. Around 30, sun-worn face, steady eyes, the look of someone who had crossed many hard miles. "My name's Eli," he said, his voice low and even. "Saw your fire last night. Wasn't sure if it was people or bait." Clara didn't lower the empty gun. "We're alive." Eli nodded. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't step any closer than necessary. Instead, he tossed a pack onto the ground. Dried meat, apples, water. No one builds a fire like that unless they're desperate. June stepped forward. "Sit. If you're not looking for trouble." He did. No probing questions. No pity. No attempt to touch them. That quiet respect made Clara wary and, against her will, more trusting. "Running from something?" Eli asked. Clara met his gaze. "No. We're moving towards something." "What's that?" May answered for her, eyes hard as steel. "Revenge." Eli didn't laugh. He just gave a faint, knowing smile. "Then you're headed the right way." He hadn't come to save them. He had come with an opportunity and a road that led straight to the men who had left them behind. The next morning, dew still clung to the grass as they followed the clear tracks of wagon wheels and horses' hooves pressed into the dry ground. Clara knelt, running her fingers along the rutted earth. "Not far," she said. "They think we're dead." The thought sent a chill through her, not of pain, but of opportunity. Eli led them through narrow rock cuts and dry creek beds, avoiding the main trail. By late afternoon, they saw smoke rising from a shallow valley. A wagon, 3 men. A campfire and their past sitting there as if nothing had ever been wrong. May stepped out first. Tom saw her, and his face drained of color. She said nothing, only raised a pistol with a single bullet left. The shot cracked through the air. Tom dropped. Clara lunged at Rex before he could draw his gun. They crashed into the dirt, fists flying, a knife flashing. She struck upward, clean and final. His scream cut off abruptly. June faced Sam beside the wagon. He was shaking, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't want to leave you," he stammered. "But you did," June said softly. She turned her back and walked away, leaving him alive to carry his shame. When it was over, only the crackle of the fire remained, and the wind moving through the valley. Clara stood tall, blood on her hands, her eyes steady at last. They hadn't come for apologies. They had come to close a chapter by their own hands. They buried Tom where he fell. A shallow grave, no marker, no prayers. Rex didn't survive the night. His groans faded and went silent before the sun could rise. As for Sam, they left him behind. When they rode away, Clara looked back only once. He was kneeling in the dirt, hands trembling, eyes hollow. Being allowed to live was mercy greater than he deserved. That day, the prairie was unnaturally quiet, not silent, but hushed like it was holding its breath, as if the land itself was waiting to see who they would become now that the past no longer clung to their heels. Eli rode ahead, offering no words of comfort. He didn't ask if they felt regret. He simply led the way, and that was enough. By a dry creek at sunset, Clara wiped the blade clean, slow, and deliberate. May sat motionless by the fire, her expression strangely calm. June lifted her face to the stars, lips moving in what felt like a final prayer for an older version of herself. They were no longer discarded wives. They were no longer victims. Blood had washed away the illusions. Fear had been buried with the traitors. When Clara stood, the wind caught her coat and flung it back like a banner. Not victory, not pride, but freedom, the kind that comes only when it is taken by one's own hands. Night settled over the dry creek bed. The small fire burned steadily now, no longer trembling like it had on those first nights when they hid in the dark. This time, they weren't hiding from anyone. Clara stared into the glowing embers, her eyes free of the old ghosts. The past had been dealt with, but the quiet in her mind didn't last long. "We could head west," she said slowly. "There's open land. No one knows who we are." May gave a slight shake of her head. "Or north. Start over." "Nor." June was silent for a long moment, then spoke unexpectedly. "What about the others?" The question hung in the air. "What do you mean?" Clara asked. "Other women," June replied, her voice no longer fragile. "The ones who are abandoned, beaten, sold. If we could do this, why stop?" Eli, sitting just beyond the firelight, glanced over. "There are plenty of men out there who believe women are weak," he said. "They truly believe it." Clara stood, her shadow stretching long across the ground. Then it's time they learned they're wrong. That was the moment everything changed. No longer a personal act of revenge. No longer a private pain. They weren't running anymore. They began to hunt. And somewhere out there, women whose names were not yet known were waiting for a storm shaped like four riders, coming over the horizon. Dry Ridge lay exposed beneath the sun like a festering sore along the frontier. A leaning saloon, a jailhouse door hanging off its hinges, and clusters of men loitering on porches as if the town belonged to them. Clara rode in first, dust spiraling behind her like a warning. May and June flanked her, hands never far from their weapons. Eli watched in silence, his gaze sharp as a blade. Leering eyes followed them. One man snorted, "Well, look what the wind dragged in." End quote. The times of the Cedars and of Than 74 wonen. Clara stopped and turned slowly. "Say that again?" Her voice was flat but cold enough to kill the laughter on the spot. They walked straight into the sheriff's office. The man inside had his boots on the desk, a bottle dangling in his hand. "You ladies lost?" He smirked. Clara set a wanted notice on the desk. "Merritt Roar. Where is he?" The sneer vanished when he saw the seal and the old bloodstain on the paper. "That name's worth a hanging from here to El Paso. What are you planning to do?" "End him," May said. "This isn't a town for vigilantes." "No." Clara leaned in closer. It's a town full of men who know what's happening and choose to do nothing. The air went rigid. At last, the sheriff sighed. North, 2 days' ride. Through the canyon near the dead elm. Clara nodded. Thank you for not pretending anymore. They left Dry Ridge at sunset. Ahead lay the canyon. Behind them, the silence of those too afraid to act. And they were riding straight toward the storm. The canyon revealed itself as the sun dipped low, dark red cliffs swallowing the last of the daylight. From a distance, thin smoke curled upward, slipping into the air like a sign of hidden sin. Clara raised her hand, signaling them to stop. No one spoke. They tied the horses behind a rocky slope and moved on foot, each step light as a shadow. Eli brought up the rear, watching every possible escape. Below, in a shallow basin, Merritt Roar's camp came into view. A fire smoldered at its center, a few men sitting around it, laughing. In the open ground between them stood a girl tied to a wooden post. Her dress was torn, her wrists raw and bleeding. She couldn't have been more than 15. June drew a slow breath, her grip tightening on her gun. May tilted her head slightly, her expression quiet but ice cold. Clara stared at the girl for a long moment. Any remaining doubt vanished. Go, she whispered. They split apart like drawn blades. May slipped left, silent as the wind. June closed in from the right. Clara moved straight through the darkness, her steps steady and deliberate. The crackle of the fire masked the pounding of their hearts. The first guard fell before he could turn. A soft sound, then nothing. By the time another man sensed something was wrong, it was already too late. Their shadows were no longer human shapes. They were an omen. They did not enter the canyon as victims. They entered it as a storm taking form. The first gunshot tore through the night. A man went down before he could even scream. The campfire flared, shadows scattering in panic. Clara charged straight for Merritt Roar. He sprang to his feet, his gun flashing as a bullet skimmed the rock wall. Smoke and dust billowed up, but Clara didn't slow. She slammed into him, driving him to the ground, her fist crashing into his jaw. "Remember me?" she growled. Roar spat blood, struggling to turn over. "You should have been dead." "Downeray." "No," Clara said, her blade pressed tight against his throat. "But you are." Around them, May fired her single remaining shot clean, final. June knocked another man down before he could reach his gun. Eli held the line between them and the darkness, his rifle cutting off every escape. The bound girl trembled as May cut the ropes. "It's over," she whispered, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Roar made one last, desperate struggle. Clara didn't hesitate. The knife came down. A sharp gasp, then nothing. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the heavy breathing of those still standing. They buried the bodies before dawn. No markers, no prayers. When the sun rose, golden light spilled into the canyon like a cleansing. They were no longer prey. They were the storm. And justice, blood-stained as it was, had finally spoken. When they returned to Dry Ridge, the town was unnaturally quiet. No applause, no questions. Only wary stares and a low, spreading fear behind shuttered windows. The girl they had rescued, Hannah, rode between May and June, a blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. The fear hadn't fully left her eyes, but something else had appeared there too. Hope. The sheriff stood on the porch, his hat in his hands. He didn't ask what had happened. He already knew. Clara didn't slow down, riding past like a gust of dust and wind. They hadn't come to be thanked. They left town before sunset. Ahead lay the open prairie, roads no one had named yet. Clara looked toward the horizon, where the wind twisted into ribbons of golden dust. "Where do we go now?" June asked. Clara didn't look back. "Where we're needed. No longer 3 abandoned women. No longer a personal vendetta. Now they were a warning, a spark of hope, a legend beginning to spread from one saloon to the next, from town to town. And if you believe justice doesn't simply appear on its own, if you believe strength has nothing to do with gender, then this story is for you. Follow their journey, because out there are still places that need a storm.